If you're placing your subjects dead center in the frame, or you're creating images with awkward and unbalanced compositions, I guarantee your photos are boring. Stay with me if you want to look at how to better compose your wildlife photos. Hey everyone, welcome into Magnolia Photography SC. I'm Jeff House and I'm a wildlife photographer in Charleston, South Carolina. Today we are going to be talking about composition when it comes to our wildlife photography. Now, composition is one of those things that is extremely important in the overall image quality and the overall interest we are able to create with our photographs. And I would place this right behind the most important aspect, which is lighting. So it is right up there with being able to engage our viewer and draw them into our photographs. So if you are trying to post on social media and you're not getting any interest, you're not getting any likes, or people just kind of look at your photographs and they're like, oh, hey, that's a cool photo. That's a nice photo. Yeah, whatever. Thanks. Appreciate the lack of interest and, energy you're showing towards my images. That can be a sign that your photos aren't the most interesting. That can be a sign that your photos are pretty boring and people aren't really thrilled with the work you're creating. So if you want to change all that, you want to create more interest with your photos, then it's really time to start looking at your composition and make sure you're doing the right things to create that interest. So let's jump in and start talking about some of the things you can do. One of the first things that you should consider when it comes to composition is filling the frame with your subject, right? We are, of course, going to have to get a little bit closer to our subject, generally speaking. Even if we're using a 600 millimeter lens or longer, we're still going to need to get closer to our subjects because we don't want the distance from our subject, right? We talk about this stuff all the time. We don't want the atmospheric conditions that can appear in our photos when we're shooting at distances to really degrade the quality, especially when we're trying to get our subject really tight in the frame. When we are really tight in the frame, we want to make sure that we're as close as possible because detail is really going to matter the closer we bring our subject to the viewer. But filling the frame is such a great way. Definitely one of my favorite techniques for creating more interest in our photos. It's great if you have distracting backgrounds and you want to limit what's happening back there. Maybe you don't want to show the habitat because maybe the background is just full of crap, right? There can be a lot of different reasons why you want to exclude something in the background. So shooting tight can really be a great method for doing that because you can really kind of blur out the background or just completely eliminate it by zooming in really tight on our subject. The other thing that shooting tight will do is really engage the viewer because filling the frame with our subject just creates a more intimate, more emotional experience for the viewer. And that can really go a long way in creating a lot of interest. Number 2 for creating a little bit more interest in your photos is make sure you're leaving some breathing room. Now, we've talked a lot about this particular compositional technique throughout many of the videos that I post on this channel. So many of you are probably familiar with this or you've heard it somewhere else, no doubt, if you've been in photography for any length of time. But breathing room simply means if we have our subject in the frame and they are looking in a certain direction or they are flying in a certain direction, we generally want to put them on the side that they are looking away from, right? So if they are looking to the right side of the frame, we would want to put our subject a little bit more towards the left side of the frame. And obviously, if they're coming from the right side of the frame, maybe they're flying right to left or running right to left. Well, then we would want to tend to put them over towards the right side of the frame so that they have that room to run or they have that room to fly across the scene. When we do that, it creates a very balanced composition. And so that can be really helpful. If we are to kind of cramp them into a side that they don't belong, it's going to make the photo feel really unbalanced, right? So if we have a bird or whatever looking to the right side of the frame, if we put them over there on the right-hand side and it looks like they're looking off the page, the viewer, they may not really understand why this is happening, but something is going to feel awkward. And what's really happening is there's a disconnect there in their brain going, okay, the animal, the subject, whatever it is, looking to the right side of the frame, but where are they looking, right? There's no space there. So if the bird or whatever is on the left-hand side of the frame and they're looking to the right, it's very easy for the viewer in their mind to be like, okay, they're looking to the right, but because they see some distance, because they see some space there, it makes sense to them mentally. The brain understands that they're looking into the scene that exists to the right side. But again, when we put them up on that edge and that's happening, now it's like, okay, where the hell are they looking? Because there is nothing over there. It's the end of the page, right? It's the end of the photo. So those things, even though they might seem like small details, go a long way with connecting with our viewer. Number 3, and this is another great way, right, is creating natural frames. So there's so many things out in nature that we can use to create a natural frame when it comes to our subject. Maybe we're using 2 tree trunks, right? We're shooting between 2 trees and we're photographing our subject that is a little bit further off in the distance. So we can use those trees to kind of frame our subjects. I commonly do this with my bird photography here right on my property when I go for my morning walks. We have a lot of docks around here. And so sometimes I get a bird in a position where they're standing between the legs or the posts of the dock, and it just creates a natural frame. We can even use tree limbs. So if you have a bird up in a tree, you may come across a situation where, depending on a certain angle, you can kind of frame your subject using those tree limbs. There are so many ways that you can utilize framing using the things that we naturally find in nature. Look for things in the foreground. Look for things in the background. Don't just get stuck on trying to see what's right in front of you, trying to place your subject between that, right? Let your eyes scan the front for those different elements that may exist. If you don't see something, kind of look towards the background, like look at your subject, right? And kind of scan left to right. Like if I were to move 10 yards to my right, does that somehow give me a natural frame in the background? These are all things that should be going through your head when you're out doing wildlife. Now, I understand that many times when we're out there and we see a subject, it might be a unique species, might just be a cool moment. And sometimes we might have to sacrifice the framing because we're trying to catch a moment. But when we have just that little extra time, when the subject isn't doing something necessarily right at that moment, take that extra second to scan really quickly and make that decision. It might take you a little bit more time in the beginning, but the more you do this and the more you ingrain it in your brain, the more this is going to be very instinctual for you, and things are going to happen much faster. And you're not going to have to worry so much about, okay, am I going to miss the shot if I'm trying to frame it? And that is where a lot of the panic and a lot of the stress comes in for many photographers. They don't feel like they can worry about the composition and worry about all those things in the same breath, if you will, right? They're trying to do one thing at a time, and that is usually to get a great picture of their subject. But I'm telling you, just give it that quick scan, because if you can start to add some of these compositional elements into your photos, you are really going to up the quality of them. And in turn, you're really going to up the interest in the viewer. Number 4, and this is one that many photographers overlook all the time. And again, I think it's partly due to the fact that when we're out in the field and something comes into sight, something comes into view, we're trying so hard to create amazing images that we often overlook some of the basic things. One of those basic things is simplifying the background, right? You got to be very cautious about what is going on beyond your subject, because that can make or break your photo. right? If you've got something really busy, something really distracting in the background, but you can shift, a few feet to your left, a few feet to your right, and you can completely simplify and change that background, that's what you need to do. Again, I think this comes back to some of the principles that we were just talking about with natural framing. We worry that we don't have enough time to take all these things into consideration and photograph our subject before they fly away or run away or something happens that kind of kills the photo. But the more you do this, the more you train your brain to kind of see these things, it is going to become instinctual, and you're going to notice that these things happen in fractions, splits of a second, and you're able to get into the positions you need to create better images. All right, keep that in mind. These things are super, super important when we're actually out in the field. Simplify those backgrounds. Number 5, drop it low, right? Get down low when photographing wildlife. Get down to their eye level. This is such a great way to change the view of the animal. And hey, this is like any compositional element out there. Getting low isn't always going to work, right? There could be times when there is something about getting low that actually detracts from the photo. If that is a gut feeling you have, then step away from that angle or take that picture, but then change your angle and continue to shoot. Grab the photo and then look at it later and go, you know what? I was right. This didn't work. Or later on, you're going to go, man, I am so glad that I got down low and captured that photo. I didn't think it was going to work, but man, that was actually the best image I got. So get all the angles while you're out there, right? That is the whole point. Change your angles. Change everything you can in the moment to get things from different perspectives. I'm always saying, shoot wide, shoot medium, shoot tight. Those are the things that you want. If you're going to create some kind of slideshow, some kind of photo book, having those 3 images can go a long way in telling the story of the wildlife. If you shoot wide and you grab more of the habitat and the environment, then you can shoot medium where you still have some of that wildlife habitat and environment, but you're bringing your subject in a little closer. So now we're bringing a little bit more attention to the detail of our subject. And then shoot tight. That's how we started off today's video, shooting tight. Bring that emotional experience to the viewer by giving them that intimate view of the animal up tight and close. So these are the things you're going to want to do, but getting low and getting on the eye level of the wildlife is something that frequently works really well to create more intriguing images. So this is something that I urge you to really get out and try and see what you think. Get a tripod that goes low. Just lay down in the prone position and take photos. I know that getting down on the ground can be hard for some of us, maybe due to injuries or body restrictions, whatever the case may be. But get as low as you possibly can, because that does create a really interesting image. It goes with anything. And honestly, I've seen this throughout my photography career. You see people who photograph flowers, and I think this is kind of a good parallel to what we're talking about. Watch someone go out and photograph a flower. I guarantee you the majority of people, you will see them standing over the flower, shooting down from standing height. Guess what? Boring as hell. That is a boring as hell photo. Reason being is that is how we see the flower every day in life, right? Same thing with wildlife. People see wildlife as they're walking through the park or they're driving in their car to work or anywhere else. And so we tend to see them from certain angles and certain levels all the time. If you're taking everything from a standing height and you're not really changing how we normally see wildlife just to begin with, boring as hell photos. The minute you change the angle and change the perspective of how we're experiencing that particular subject, whether it be a flower or whether it be a bird, an animal, whatever, you're going to create a lot more visual interest in your images. It is key to change up the perspective of how we normally see things every day. Number 6, and this is the last tip for good composition, guys, and creating more interest in your photos, but do a shoot through. Well, what is a shoot through? Use elements out in nature to shoot through to capture your subject. You might be photographing, I don't know, maybe a duck on a pond, something along that line, right? A lot of times when we're photographing around ponds, we have higher grasses along the edges of the pond, right? This is a great way. You can kind of use the shoot through to create frames, right? Maybe we have a couple blades of thick grass coming up. Use those two blades as a frame to shoot that duck on the water as they're swimming around. That is a great way to create a more interesting photo of just a duck swimming on the pond, right? We've all seen those shots. That can be a little repetitive, a little boring. But if you can use some of those foreground visual elements to create frames, to shoot through, then it gives that viewer that different perspective, kind of like we were just talking about a second ago. No one's sneaking around the park looking through blades of grass to see the duck, right? That's not something you commonly see people do. They're walking around a path. They're looking, oh, look at the duck, blah, 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 right? Well, if that's how you're going to photograph it and that's how they're used to seeing it, it's just another, it's a snapshot, right? It's just how they're used to seeing it. Doesn't create any interest. Figure out ways to use grasses, to use bushes, to use trees, to use whatever is out there in front of you to create another perspective of what you're photographing. And shooting through the grasses and things like that kind of gives you that feeling as though you were not there with the bird, right? It kind of gives you the feeling, or gives the viewer the feeling, that you were somehow way back, you know, in the vegetation somewhere, hiding away, stalking this duck, right? Not in a creepy way, of course, but you get what I'm saying, right? It wasn't like you were just some walker by, some bystander just taking a boring picture of an animal. Looks like you had intent. It looks like you were doing things to really be sneaky, right? And sly and stealth. And you got this cool photo based on doing those things. So these are things, guys, all of these things that we just discussed here, these 6 things are ways that you can really create a lot more visual interest in your photos. If you are not using these, then you better start using them today. And they are easy, quick ways for you to completely change the feeling of your photography. All right, what did you think about these? Are these things that you are using? Is there anything that you kind of thought about, but you're like, you know what? That is definitely something that I need to use the next time I go out. If you found this interesting, if you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up, as it'll push it out to people just like you and I who love talking about this stuff, who love learning about this stuff. And it's something I would appreciate greatly. Don't forget, while you're here, to also consider subscribing to the channel. And I totally appreciate if you take the time to do that. Hey, if you want to improve your photo editing, you want to get away from monthly subscriptions, head down to the show notes where you can use my special link to go over to DxO Photolab and make a purchase of any of their software using my special discount code Magnolia to get 15% off any and all of your purchases. And while you're at it, head on over to magnoliaphotographysc.com. I have a bunch of products over there, including DxO presets and various wildlife photography guides to help you guys with your journey in wildlife photography. Thank you so much for stopping by, guys. I appreciate your time and your patience and sticking with me through this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, good luck with your wildlife photography and take care.